If you have not seen Biblical Israel versus modern day Israel on my channel, it's one of my deep dives. Go into my deep dive section playlist. Watch that at some point after you see this. This is part 2. We are now entering into Revelations. I would say the scary part of the Bible. And what we are going to do is we are going to make the connection between what is happening geopolitically right now, what is predicted to happen with geopolitics, and how this all ties in to biblical Israel versus modern day Israel. So if you saw that part, then you know that what we explained is that when in the Bible, when Jesus said, I shall call you Israel, he was speaking to Jacob, right? So Jacob, person in the Bible, that's who he was speaking to. If you also saw that part, you know, one of the questions that I had is that what happened to those missing books from the Bible? How do we know that you have all the books that are in the Bible? How do you know that we're not being manipulated in some way, shape, or form in order to pursue and continue this idea of this greater Israel project? How do we know that this hasn't been the case for all time? And I said, if that's the case, then you're looking at the biggest psyop ever played in the world, in my opinion. There was a professor recently, Professor Jing. He obviously must have been thinking the same thing I'm thinking, but he breaks this down in such a way that I think people really need to see to fully understand when we talk about the book of Revelations. Revelations is the end times for those who are not aware. I grew up in the church. I had many criticisms, you know, of the church, and I have questions. I still have questions to this day. But Revelations is the book where we get into Armageddon. We talk about, you know, the rapture. We talk about the 7 years of tribulation, the 7 years of peace, and the Antichrist, etc. So what we are going to do is we're going to start with the geopolitics part first, so you can see the map. And then we're going to lead right into Revelations. Again, shout out to Professor Jing. This video, at least a clip of it, was going viral everywhere on social media. He did this presentation for his students. Listen to what he says. Everyone pay attention.
Is that Europe is planning to go to war with Russia. Okay? Europe is about to go to war with Russia, okay? At the same time, you have a lot of immigrants in Europe. And this is going to create civil wars in Europe, okay? Civil war. So you have both war with Russia as well as civil war. So Europe is kind of screwed, okay? America has the same situation where the left-right divide is so polarized that eventually they'll go to war. If you read the news, you may have heard about the shootings at Brown University, as well as this MIT physicist who was shot, okay? So random violence will be more and more common in the United States. And you can argue that it's all deliberate because the idea is this. Let's just say you have a jar. You put red ants in the jar and black ants in a jar. They get along fine. But you take the jar and you just shake it up, and now they're at war with each other, okay? That's what's happening, where the left and right, they really don't like each other. They don't talk to each other, and they refuse to engage in debate with each other.
And that is by design. And notice what he said about all the chaotic incidents that are happening here in the US back to back to back. This is what I was telling you guys last stream when I said they want chaos. See, chaos is key. It's actually crucial if you believe in the end times prophecy, if you believe in this greater Israel project, that chaos must happen in order to lead to some type of peace. I'll explain that a little bit later. Let's continue.
But they're not going to fight each other unless there's violence, in which case their tribal mentality takes over and they start killing each other, okay? So we can expect civil war in the United States. Then you're going to have the Americans start to attack Venezuela and possibly other countries in South America. So America is in for a bad time, okay? China, yeah, I mean, Japan and China and India, they're all going to have conflicts with each other. But also what we should expect is that America starts to embargo China, meaning America uses its sea power to block China from accessing resources from overseas. And China imports most of its oil and a lot of its food. So if there's a blockade of China, you can expect the Chinese economy to really suffer, okay?
Now think about this. What is happening right now? Isn't the U.S. really trying to back Taiwan so that Taiwan can have this conflict with China? For those who are not aware, there was this doctrine that was established a long time ago called One China. So that would mean that China and Taiwan are one. So Taiwan is part of China, China is part of Taiwan. But apparently they're saying that, Taiwan does want some independence and the U.S. backs Taiwan. Now, pay attention to what is happening. From what I understand, from what I'm hearing from overseas, is that there are U.S. ships all over there by Taiwan. So let's go on a little bit more.
All right. And then what we can expect to happen is America at some point will go to war with Iran, and this will destroy both countries. Okay? Iran will not lose this war, but it won't win this war either, because America is just going to bomb the crap out of Iran. It's going to send Iran back decades.
I think he is correct about this. This is why I'm telling everybody, Donald Trump is making the moves to make all this happen. Now, I think regardless who was president, whether it was a Democrat or a Republican, this was inevitable. One of the things that Brian Berlatek has explained so well is that the foreign policy decisions have already been made. And if you look at the Brookings Institute report, you can see this for yourself if you look them up online. So the reality is, as I told you, the president don't really run shit. The president don't really run the country. They're just another puppet. Donald Trump is in a unique position because he's not just the president, he's also a billionaire. So he's up there with the elites and at the same time holding public office. That's a dangerous position, right? So he can be very lethal. But the reality is, this is what they want. They're already moving in that direction. Why do you think they're talking about the Iran protests so much? Donald Trump put out the statement and said, we need to go liberate and help the people of Iran. I told you, watch that word liberate. That means regime change. Now, regardless of how you feel about the regime in Iran, that is not our concern. That is their concern, right? So the U.S. wants to come in. They'll use the protests as an excuse, which a lot of these protests have infiltrators anyway. CIA, Mossad, to start this type of color revolution. The U.S. uses that as an excuse. They go in, they say, see, we're here to liberate the people, then he implements regime change. Iran will suffer a terrible fate if that regime change happens by the hands of the West, just like people in Afghanistan did and Iraq. And you see what's happening right now in Syria. So pay attention, because they're already moving in that direction. Donald Trump was the one that moved the capital. Remember, he moved the capital in Jerusalem, setting the stage for the biblical end times.
But America will lose this war, but this is important because if America loses war, it's forced out of the Middle East. And once it's forced out of the Middle East, all its military assets goes to Israel, which creates the Pax Judea. Yeah, does that make sense, guys? That's the plan. Okay, now you have Pax Judea.
Pax Judaica. This is the part you need to pay attention to right here. All right. So there will be war between the U.S. and Iran, Israel and Iran. And what he is predicting is that neither side is really going to win. We know Iran is very powerful. Let's not pretend like they're not, right? But it is going to weaken both. Then what happens to Israel? Watch this.
And what Pax Judea will do is start to control the world. Because through chaos and conflict, Pax Judea can make a lot of money, right? Because Pax Judea, what's going to happen is that you have these technology companies like Google, they're going to move over to Pax Judea and build a global surveillance state.
What did I tell you about the tech bros? Anybody notice that a lot of the tech CEOs are pro-Israel? Gee, I wonder why. Sergey Brin, David Sachs. Everybody notice a lot of these guys are pro-Israel? Yeah, there's a reason for that. So this is what I was saying about Palantir, the surveillance state, AI increasing in Israel, Israel increasing technology. This is not a coincidence. This is all on purpose. Once you start to see these companies move over to Israel and invest more there, you need to be prepared. Because yes, Israel is increasing their surveillance state. They made it very publicly. They tell you they spy on us and we spy on them. I mean, it's not like that is a secret. Why do you think you hear Mike Huckabee saying it out loud that we have to support Israel because of biblical reasons? Why do you think Ted Cruz is saying it out loud? We must do it because the Bible tells us to. By the way, all of these people know this. And I don't sit here today saying that I honestly do not believe that not one politician in DC doesn't know what the end game is. I think they all know. And why do I think that? Because it was Cynthia McKinney who made it very clear that the moment that she was sworn into Congress, one of the things that they said to her is that you have to stand by and be pro-Israel. You got to stand by Israel. You have to have this alliance with Israel. They all know. That's why even some of the ones that have sympathy for the Palestinian people, that's why even they only go so far with their rhetoric. Ultimately, they know that Democrat leadership, Republican leadership, and then who's above them, whoever is in the White House, regardless of the party, who's above them. Remember, we had that pyramid, the billionaires and the central banks. So we all know when I say deep state, that's who I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a millionaire. I'm talking about the people that have that 0.0.1%. I'm talking about the billionaires. I'm talking about the central banks, the people that none of us can touch. That's where the real power lies. The politicians are just puppets. They're basically the spokesman, but they're not the people that are pulling the strings. Let's continue a little bit more in here.
You have civil wars, you need AI to control people. If you're going to war with Russia, you need weapons, okay? But you also need financing as well. So you can expect a lot of banks to move to Israel, and it's possible Israel becomes now the global reserve currency because everyone is trading with Israel. If you're Russia, you need to trade you need to trade your resources, right? Oil, energy, and grain, okay? So Russia controls a third of the world's carbohydrates. Guess what, guys? Israel controls Africa. So what will happen is that Russia and other countries will sign a trade agreement with Israel, and Israel becomes the center of global trade.
There it is.
Does that make sense? So this is how Pax Judea will profit. And
stop here for a second where he says profit. So Pax Judaica, which basically means peace, like peace in Israel. What you have to understand, when you hear Netanyahu and the rest of his cronies say they do want peace, they're not talking about the peace that we're talking about. When we say we want peace, we want Palestinian people to be free. We want them to have self-liberation. We want them to have, like, whether it's their own state. So we just don't want them to be caged in, and we want Israel to stop attacking them and leave them the hell alone. We want them to be able to have their land back. Like, that's what we mean when we say we want peace. When Israel says they want peace, what they're talking about is this. Their idea of peace is them being at the center of global trade and intelligence technology, them having major control in the Middle East and all the other, what is left of the Muslim and Arab countries at that point in time, everyone bending the knee to Israel. Their idea of peace is them being in power and you responding and answering to them. That's what they're talking about. Now we get to the biblical part.
Remember that Israel has the world's best intelligence agency, the Mossad. And what they can do is go around the world and create as much chaos as possible. Okay?
Yep.
So while the world is burning, Israel, Pax Judea, is profiting. And that's what the future looks like for the next 10, 20 years. And this will, of course, lead to the rise of the Antichrist.
There it is. The Antichrist.
Who will take control of Pax Judea and force the world to eventually attack Israel in something called the War of Gog and Magog. And this will, of course, lead to the second coming of Jesus. So that's a grand...
Stop here. Now, there are disagreements about the Antichrist. You know, some people think the Antichrist will be an actual person. Some people think the Antichrist could be a group of people. But it also could be that the Antichrist could just describe the state of the world at that point in time. Again, like Revelations, it explains that there's supposed to be 7 years of tribulation. We're talking about famine, chaos, unstoppable, uncontrollable wars. But then there will also be 7 years of peace. 7 years of peace through the Antichrist first. And then after those years of peace, there's going to be just trial and tribulation. And then this is supposed to be at the point where Jesus, you know, comes back riding on a white horse. You guys know the story if you went to, you know, church, riding on a white horse to stop all of this. Now, according to the Bible, if you are part of the rapture, so if the rapture happens, which the rapture means that these are people who believe and follow Jesus Christ, they would be taken up to heaven. They would miss all of this. So according to the Bible, they would not be present on earth when these trials and tribulations began. But for everyone else who doesn't believe, they would be here, and it essentially would be hell on earth, is what it talks about. So, and that's if you believe in this way. But this whole thing about the biblical end times, this is what I was talking about. Whereas Israel, we will be at the center. It will be the center of everything, and all the power, whether it's technology, whether it's AI, whether it's you know, finance, all the power will be centered there. And pay attention to something else. Do you guys notice how our country, I keep telling you, we're not really investing in our own country. We're not really investing in our own infrastructure the way that we should be when you compare it to other countries and stuff like that. You know, I mean, but we're investing in Israel. Like everyone doesn't have healthcare here, but everyone has healthcare in Israel. We don't have free public universities here, but they can go to school for free. And so do you see what I'm saying? Israel is very tiny now, but that is not the goal. The goal is to expand and to create what they call the promised land. And I think we're going to get to that part in just a second. Let me come up here. Yes, the promised land.
Promised land. This is the Greater Israel Project. Okay, this is what Yahweh promised to Abraham in the Bible. As you can see, it's pretty huge. It's the entire Middle East. It extends from the Nile to the Euphrates in Iraq. Okay, it's a huge area. And if you say the Israelites are, sorry, the Israelis want to achieve the Greater Israel Project.
One problem here. Let me go back to this map. There is something I need to show you. On this map, let me get them back to it here.
All right, guys, the promised land.
On this map, you know what's included in Greater Israel? Jordan, Baghdad. Here we have part of Africa. Remember I told you they're going to take part of Africa? I think this is part of Saudi Arabia because that's not all of Saudi Arabia. Of course, there's Syria. See how they've basically taken all of this? Yeah. Now, wait till we get to the IDF soldier badge.
This is the Greater Israel Project. Okay, this is what Yahweh promised to Abraham in the Bible. As you can see, it's pretty huge. It's the entire Middle East. It extends from the Nile to the Euphrates in Iraq. Okay, it's a huge area. And if you say the Israelites are, sorry, the Israelis want to achieve the Greater Israel Project, they call you a conspiracy theorist. So like, we don't want that, okay? But explain two things to me. First of all, why is the Greater Israel map on a chevron of an IDF soldier, okay? These are soldiers, Israeli soldiers, and they wear the insignia of the Greater Israel Project, okay?
So, and anyone saying that the Greater Israel Project is a myth, is obviously not paying attention because Benjamin Netanyahu has unveiled it right in front of Congress. I mean, it is very obvious what they want to do. So this is why I say that Israel has to be stopped. Do you guys understand why I keep saying that this destruction has to stop? Now, some of you may be watching this and wondering, well, what could possibly change anything? The other Arab nations are going to have to form an alliance against Israel. This is why I keep pointing fingers at Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Jordan, Turkey. They are all going to have to come together to stop this. If they keep bending the knee to Israel and the United States, this could be the future. And again, this is also if you believe in the biblical prophecy. Not everyone does, obviously. And then that takes me back to part 1 of this series when I was talking about, do we even know if those are all the books from the Bible? Because I've read before that there's lost books from the Bible. Also, who really sat down and wrote the Bible? Who did the translation? How do you know you're getting the full story and not just the one that Zionists wanted you to know? It is always important to ask questions. And anyone telling you that you should not ask questions, you need to honestly look at them with a side eye. What is it they don't want you to know or they don't want you to ask about? So these are things that need to be answered. There are some that follow the New Testament, some that follow the Old Testament, some that look at both, but the New Testament is supposed to basically overrule the Old Testament. So who's right? And then when you look at the different denominations within Christianity, who is correct? Is it the Pentecostals? Is it the Methodists? Is it the what do we used to call them? The Lutherans? Who is, because people have different Bibles. And this is why Israel needs the evangelicals. This is why they need you. This is why they flew 1,000 pastors to Israel to come back home and brainwash their congregation that Israel is not committing genocide and this is what God wants. This is why they freaked out when they saw that some of the young right-wing people are turning away from Israel. They didn't like seeing those numbers. This is why they're panicking. They need the evangelicals. They need to use you. One more part here.
This is the map. Also, if you look at the flag of Israel, there are 2 blue lines, right? These represent rivers, the Nile and the Euphrates. All right? So if it's a conspiracy theory, then how do you explain these 2 things? All right, but I want to argue to, you know what? Pax Judea, it's not about Israel or the Greater Israel Project. What it is ultimately is an alliance of transnational capital, multinationals like Google and Meta, and intelligence agencies that were based in Jerusalem, okay?
Ding, 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 ding. We have a poll there, so I don't know if everyone got a chance to answer the poll. This is what it's about. Transnational capital, multinationals, and intelligence agencies that stand to profit from chaos and conflict around the world. So in order for the surveillance and intelligence agencies to make more money, they need chaos. They need a reason to ramp up. And that's why we keep calling these false flags. A lot of these things that are happening here in the United States and across the world, they want the chaos. They need it. We can't feed into it. But deception is a hell of a drug. A lot of people have been deceived. And see, I want to take you to this part here. Let's go ahead and bring up Revelations, the tribulation phase. The 7-year tribulation begins with peace. This is the part I think that everyone should pay attention to here. Let me go down to 3.5 years. Soon after this false Christ has promised peace for 7 years, he breaks the peace and commands the world to worship him as God. This act unleashes the wrath of God upon the earth as the 7 horses of Revelation are sent out. War breaks upon the earth. Millions die as a result from this war and the ensuing destruction of Earth's food supply. Many people will die of starvation, disease, pestilence. So this is what it says here during the Great Tribulation. But then when we fast forward, one thing you'll see here when we get to that peace period, the 7 years of peace is orchestrated by the Antichrist. When the Antichrist arrives on earth just after the rapture of the church occurs, he will institute a 7-year peace plan over the nations of the world. In the midst of these 7 years, he will announce that he is God and command the world to worship him. So this is the big kicker, right? Like at first you're going to see peace. And I think people are going to be happy according to the scripture. People be happy and say, yay, world peace. Woohoo. But then soon after there will come the period of tribulation, constant chaos, nonstop wars, again, according to scripture. And then later on, Jesus is supposed to come in on the white horse. Let's go down here. The return of Jesus to the earth. All of the events of the tribulation and the great tribulation are completed at the end of chapter 18 in the book of Revelation. As we read chapter 19, we see Jesus returning to earth on a great white horse with an army of those who he has redeemed from the earth. You can also see symbolism of this in the Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, when Gandalf appears on the white horse, for those who have seen Lord of the Rings. So here's the question. And so again, you guys know I'm going to be asking these damn questions. We all know that Israel is a secular state. It's not a religious state. It's a secular state. But then you have people like Mike Huckabee saying we have to support Israel because the Bible tells us to. So how does a secular state get all this support based on scripture when the United States of America has separation of church and state? And not only that, again, it's not a religious state, secular. So what Israel will need to do, and what I believe they plan on doing, is to make the case, obviously, for the biblical narrative. And in order to do that, they'll still be secular. But in order to do that, that's where the geopolitics comes in. We need to take the rest of this land in order to pursue that. We have to take Gaza. We have to take the West Bank. We have to take the rest of Syria. We got to get Jordan. We got from the river to the sea. We got to take all of that to establish that true religious place. Now, one of these steps has already been accomplished because Donald Trump moved the embassy. And you know they got to move the temple. That's another thing. But people are really being conned. And that's why I really call this the biggest psyop of all time. A lot of deception. And if you look at the way that this reporter is questioning Netanyahu, by the way, yeah, I agree. Peak journalism. She killed it. Look at the expression on his face. Listen to what she says.
You know, you've been accused of being a war criminal. If you went to go to several countries in Europe, you're going to get arrested. This is not just mad campus radicalism. This is a feeling around the world. You said it yourself to us just now. In public opinion around the world, Israel is doing very poorly. And it's doing very poorly because people see a country that is behaving in a way that is not compatible with being a liberal democracy. And therefore, I think you have a problem. I think that loss of public opinion, what struck me from your autobiography was how subtly and for how long you have understood this. You know that political power comes from public opinion, and you know that you need to win the battle of public opinion, and you're losing it. You've absolutely lost it in Europe, but much more worryingly for you, you're losing it in America. Israel is behaving in a way that we think is incompatible with the kind of liberal democracy that we claim.
Well, the liberal democracies, the ideas, the values that we cherish,
Prime Minister, it really isn't just extreme radicals. There are huge numbers of people who are concerned about Israel's behavior, frankly, including people like me.
And that's why you see that look on Benjamin Netanyahu's face, because no one really presses them that way. And so when we talk about the book of Revelations, they use that as an excuse. They've been using the Bible as an excuse. Essentially, what Israel is a Zionist institution. And Zionism and Judaism is not the same thing. but they have conflated the two. And this is also why they're trying to pass, they really want to pass this definition, because they want to be able to say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. That's why you see them heading in that direction, because they want to be able to say that this is a religious place, even though it's a secular state. But we have to have this place because the Bible says so, even though you're not a religious state. And there were already people who were there in the area. Zionism came in and pushed those people out. A lot of the people that live in Israel are Ashkenazi. A lot of them that live there, they're not the indigenous people. So essentially you have settler colonialism posing as indigenous people to justify genocide, brutality, and hostility against anyone else who doesn't bend the knee. That's essentially what Israel is. We have to be careful that people just do not end up, falling into these things, because it's scary what's happening. Very scary. Now, one of the things that is said here, I want to point this out. The View said, Sabby, love your work, but when it comes to morality, it really doesn't matter what it says in the Bible. It's a book written by humans, translated by humans with their own perceptions. But it does matter to a lot of people. That's the point that I'm trying to get across. That's what I want you to understand. A lot of people follow it and adhere to it and believe that this is what they are supposed to do. And now I say, look, people have a right to practice whatever religion they want to practice. But I will say this. I think we need to at some point go back through the history of who constructed the Bible. I'm not talking about the apostles with Jesus. I'm talking about who translated that Bible and what was the real agenda. Let's see that poll. There's some polls in this house. There's some polls in this house. All right. Have you heard of Pax Judea? 5,419 votes. 20% said yes. 69% said no. Pax who? And 11% said sounds familiar, but not sure. Interesting. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.